Good evening, you're watching Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. On the show tonight, first it was Environment Minister Jayanti Natarajan. Now the Tribal Affairs Minister expresses strong reservations on Chidambaram's proposal to fast-track infrastructure projects. Will the ministers at war hurt the reform process? Also, as we examine Arvind Kejriwal's grandstanding style of politics, has he succeeded in denting the Gandhi family image? Those are our big debates tonight, but let's get straight to our top story this evening. First, it was Environment Minister Jayanti Natarajan. Now the Tribal Affairs Minister K has told NDTV that he too has serious reservations about the Finance Minister's proposal to fast-track mega infrastructure projects through a National Investment Board. Mr. Deo says he will not allow the interests of tribals to be bypassed. Last night, NDTV broke the story of Jayanti Natarajan's letter to the Prime Minister, where she has strongly objected to this proposal. Mr. Chidambaram is, however, keen to push it through since many big projects have been waiting, in some cases for years, to get clearances.
The much talked about National Investment Board seems to have run into some rough weather. Environment Minister Jayanti Natarajan has already written to the Prime Minister expressing her concerns. Another name that's being talked about is Kishore Chandra Deo. Sir, thank you very much for talking to us. We hear that you too are opposed to the idea of National Investment Board that talks about fast-tracking projects.
See, I have not...
infrastructure projects.
I have not expressed any opinion about the National Investment Board. It's not that I'm opposed to a particular project or a particular idea. My insistence is to the implementation of the Forest Right Act and to the Panchayat extension to scheduled areas. See, these are laws of the land which they are in force. And laws, I think, have been enacted in Parliament to be observed, not in the breach, but in their... in the way that they exist today.
Right, in letter and spirit.
In letter and spirit. And in fact, I had written to my colleague, Jayanti Nataraj, that no clearances should be given for any project until there's total compliance of the Forest Right Act and other PESA conditions.
Well, let's just take a look once again at what concerns Jayanti Natarajan had raised in her letter to the Prime Minister, which she had written yesterday. Objecting strongly to this National Investment Board, she had said, among other things, that the manner in which sweeping changes are being sought to the rules of business are disturbing, that the consequences are serious on the way ministries are going to be run, that if any decision is overruled, who will answer in Parliament, that why should the Investment Board step in on a minister's decision, and that the Investment Board has no constitutional authority to do so. She says it will decimate the role of individual ministries. And a particularly controversial part of the proposal is that industrialists who are going to invest more than 1,000 crores in a mega project will be allowed to appeal to this investment board if they're not happy with the Environment Ministry's decisions. She says, why should industrialists only be given that right of appeal, that NGOs should be able to appeal as well? Now, all of this is based on a draft cabinet note that was circulated last week, which now various ministries are looking at and are commenting on. And what this draft note that has been circulated by the Finance Ministry says is that the board will expedite projects that are stalled because they are waiting for approvals from various ministries. It will be chaired by the Prime Minister with the Finance and Law Ministers as members. The board's secretariat will monitor projects. It will flag delays and set time frames for specific ministries and their approvals. But if those ministries fail to decide within that time, then the board will take the decision and its decisions will be binding on all ministries. So the question tonight is that with ministers at war over this issue, will all of this hurt the reform process the government is so keen to push through? We have on the program with us tonight Manish Tiwari, Lok Sabha MP and Congress spokesperson. We have well-known economist Dr. Surjit Bhalla. Also with us is Mr. Shekhar Singh, activist and member of the National Campaign for People's Right to Information. We have the editor-in-chief of Outlook, Mr. Krishna Prasad. Manish Tiwari, to you first. Isn't this a big blow to the government that's trying so hard right now to push forward this reform process, to fast-track infrastructure projects, when you have now key opposition from key ministries to all of this?
First of all, Nidhi, members of Parliament are not privy to draft cabinet notes, which by their very nature are confidential if not secret. Since you have access to it and since you are quoting from it, I believe that what you're saying, is correct. So therefore, to extrapolate from there, I think you need to see this in a certain modicum of balance. And the modicum of balance is that you have different ministries of the government which administer different legislations. For example, the Environment Minister administers the environmental laws. You have the Tribal Rights Minister who actually administers the laws pertaining to tribal rights. And then you have the Finance Minister who has the overall remit of looking at the larger economic development, progress, growth of the country. So therefore, whenever a draft cabinet note is circulated, it is in keeping with the doctrine of candor that different ministries, would obviously put their point of view across. And I don't think it is a case of ministers being at war or ministries being at war. At the end of the day, once all those views are collated, they are harmonized, it goes to the cabinet, and the cabinet decision is then binding on everybody.
But at the end of the day, these are, not just, views and candor that is being shared, Manish. It's also very serious reservations that Jayanti Natarajan has written in her letter. I mean, her letter is 5 pages long and very strong language has been used. She feels that the whole idea of a National Investment Board is unconstitutional, illegal, and is something that will undermine the authority of individual ministries. Mr. Deo says he doesn't want tribal rights to be compromised in any way either. So there is clearly a very, very serious difference of opinion. And for a government that wants to fast-track infrastructure projects, my question is that isn't then this a difficult situation for the government to be in? Of course, I know it's hard for you to admit that also. You're kind of stuck between the two sides.
No, I am not stuck between the two sides, but I obviously do not want to speak for the Environment Minister, who was a fellow spokesperson till some time back. And I obviously do not want to speak for the Tribal Affairs Minister, who is a very senior member of Parliament. He has spent 5 or 6 terms in the Lok Sabha. And obviously, the Finance Minister, has been the Home Minister earlier. He's been the Finance Minister. So therefore, he has his own seniority and gravitas. But suffice to say, you've had instances earlier when the entire reform process started off in 1991. The Foreign Investment Promotion Board was created and constituted. It used to be a part of the Prime Minister's office, and if I remember correctly, the then Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, Amarnath Verma, used to chair the Foreign Investment Promotion Board. So therefore, the creation of a single window facility or the creation of processes and procedures, which can fast track projects, I don't think is something which is unusual or should not be done. On the contrary, what I've heard from you, and since you are quoting from the draft cabinet note, all that it suggests is that if there are certain timelines which are laid down either in the law or in the rules of business, and if they are not adhered to by the respective ministries, then obviously somebody has to take a call. And in the Westminster form of government, the buck ultimately stops with the Prime Minister. So therefore, if the Prime Minister takes it upon himself and becomes the chairperson of the board, you will see the next phase of what is called process reform or structural reform actually going through. I think that's a good point. I
think the point you're making is that you can't have sort of this no time limit. You can't have projects that are sat on for years, clearances not given for years, which has happened in many cases. Dr. Surjit Bhalla, there's been a lot of criticism of the Environment Ministry lately. In particular, one national magazine called it Green Terror and the biggest stumbling block to India's growth story. Do you think that's a fair assessment of the Environment Ministry today?
Well, that's a larger question which I really don't need to answer, but I just want to follow up based on this letter that I think, in my humble opinion, Ms. Natarajan has missed the forest for the trees. As Mr. Tiwari rightly said, if a project is stalled for whatever reason beyond a certain time limit, which is, if you will, a reasonable time limit, there is another set of ministers who will look at this. Now, she brings in all kinds of actually non-sequiturs as to this is not how, whether it is constitutional or not, and whether the rights have been observed, how she's doing her duty very well for preserving the environment. All of that is correct, and all of that is quite irrelevant for the functioning of this investment board. So, or this final approval authority. I don't know what the storm in a teacup is. I don't know what Ms. Natarajan is claiming. She's claiming that this investment board will overrule and decide on who is a good minister, who is a bad minister. It's a really quite a telling document that if this is how cabinet ministers are behaving, maybe that's why we've got policy paralysis.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.